Hi, everyone. This is Kurt Roney, if you haven't already met me. And I am your instructor if you're taking Business 410 or Business 670 or Business 671. All of those courses are in strategic management. In this video, we're going to talk about trends in the economy. Primarily the U.S. economy, but from time to time we'll get into trends beyond the U.S. economy as well. And these trends, of course, are extremely important for those of us who study or practice strategic management for a very good reason. And that is that the essence of strategic management, if you get it down to very simple terms, is to try to achieve a fit between what resources and capabilities management has under its control and that external environment that management cannot control, but nevertheless needs to understand and even try to predict, even though it's difficult to do that. So strategy, when it works well, achieves a fit between the internal capabilities and resources of a firm and what's going on outside the firm. And it's that fit that is so difficult to achieve, but ideally, if it can be accomplished, will enable a firm to perform well. Now, what is that external environment? How does that how does it look? By the way, I drink a lot of coffee during these videos to keep my throat moist. And at this time of year, especially so, because I make a lot of videos to get the courses started. In any event, the external environment for our purposes in this course is in three domains or three parts. The economy, which covers just about everything or affects just about everything. The industries, including the industry in which our firm is located or our firm's businesses are located, and the markets that they serve. So we have the economy very broad at one extent, and individual markets that our firm attempts to serve. And then at the very end, the industries that are affected by those markets. And both of those are affected by the economy. The markets are affected fairly quickly by changes in financial conditions, interest rates, consumer spending power, industrial investment, and so forth, economic cycles. So if you will, the markets are sort of the ham and the sandwich. We have the economy affecting the markets, which affect the problems and opportunities of the industries that we serve. Now, you may have heard of other models that describe the external environment. Maybe the most popular is PESTEL, P-E-S-T-E-L, stands for political, economic, sociological, technological, environmental, and legal. Boy, I'm glad I could remember all those at my age. Anyway, what we find is that all of those items in PESTEL that are not mentioned by economy, market, and industry are somehow fit into those three broader domains. And so in this course, we just focus on those three. And in this video, we'll be talking about the major drivers in the economy that can affect performance potentials of the industries that we're in, and particularly affecting the problems and opportunities represented by their markets. So with that, I think what I'd better do is just get started talking about the economy. And I might add that I'm making this video on August 23 of 2020. And the reason I say that is because things are changing so fast in this economy. As I speak into the microphone and the camera here today, we have a pandemic, a coronavirus pandemic in the classroom and class buildings. We have to wear face masks and take lots of other precautions, social distancing and so forth. But it's hoped that in the near future, we'll have some drugs that will enable us to treat people who get the virus, who suffer from the virus, the coronavirus. And not long thereafter, hopefully vaccines that will enable us to become immune from this terrible disease, which is affecting countries all over the world, including the United States in a major way. The result of the coronavirus has had a big impact on the economy, as you already know, I would think. But the videos that have been recorded and placed on Moodle and our other websites prior to the onset of the coronavirus made no assumptions for that virus. And so the trends and forecasts in those earlier videos are now out of date. So if you happen to have one of those earlier videos, dispose of it and look at this one instead. And if and when we have new drugs to treat the coronavirus and eventually a vaccine, and we can see how long it will take to distribute those drugs and vaccines, how many booster shots will be required, and so forth, we'll have a better idea about how quickly the economy can recover. And of course, that'll change what the contents of a video like this one. So this video will last until we get news about new vaccines and new therapeutics, and then I'll have to make another video, and probably one after that. What I can tell you is that the publications I read say that even after we have a vaccine, or some vaccines, there are several under development, that it will take some time for the economy to recover fully, and that the recovery time will differ between industries. So in an industry such as airlines and aircraft manufacturers, what I read says that it won't be until 2024 until we have a full-blown recovery, and that's assuming that we get some vaccines near the end of 2020 or early 2021. Other industries, however, will undoubtedly recover faster, including those that have been hit very hard, such as entertainment and hopefully food service. Although even after we have the vaccine, I think it'll be some time before people feel confident enough to go sit in a crowded restaurant or go into a crowded bar again. So even after we get the vaccine and therapeutic drugs, it'll be a while before the economy recovers. And depending on the industry that we're in, it'll take more or less time for that recovery to be felt. Now we can begin with the PowerPoint slides. So let me see if I can just get that thing going here. If you've seen my videos before, you know that I'm a little clumsy when it comes to getting up the PowerPoints, but this time I seem to have done all right. So we're going to talk about macroeconomic trends in this video. That's assuming I can get the PowerPoints advanced. There we are. So the graphs that are supplied by the U.S. Commerce Department or the data supplied by the Commerce Department, which are then used by the Federal Reserve to create a lot of these nice graphs that we use, among others. But they look a lot different than they used to in prior videos. And that's because the scale has to be expanded so much. You can see that in the first quarter of this year, when the pandemic was first felt in the second and third months, that we had a steep downturn, and the economy shrunk by about a third, 33%. That's historic, and it's terrible. But that has had great effect on many industries, including food service, that is restaurants, entertainment, airlines, and so on. On the other hand, groceries and home supply retailers have actually prospered because people spend so much more time at home. They need to buy more groceries and so forth. So even the pandemic has had some favorable effects on some industries. Here we can see the changes a little more easily on a quarter by quarter basis. But again, you can see that great big drop in I said the first quarter in the prior graph, it's the second quarter, isn't it? And here we see that 33% drop. The drop began in the first quarter. You can see it was about 5%, but the second quarter was rough. The third quarter will be an improvement. We'll see some forecasts of that shortly. But even though we have an improvement, let's say of half of the 30% decline, that would still mean that we'd have a decline for in the third quarter of year to date, maybe 15% or so. The outlook for the whole year is closer to 6%. I frankly am a little doubtful of that. I think it'll be more. If you think we have it bad, take a look at how things have been going in other parts of the world, particularly European countries. And these are the declines that were experienced through the second quarter in other countries compared to our own. And we can see that And I'm sorry, and this was compared to the fourth quarter of the prior year. But Spain and England have really had a rough time. We need to focus on just what the components of the GDP are. In the prior version of this video, I showed a series of pie charts starting in, I think, 1990 and showing how these components are fairly stable. Their proportions don't change a great deal. But the role of government has changed pretty significantly. Until recently, it was getting smaller, but right now, government expenditures last year accounted for 17% of GDP. The big chunk, and by the way, that's the yellow wedge in this pie chart. But the big chunk, of course, is the blue wedge, and it's about that represents consumer expenditures, personal consumption expenditures, PCE, and its actual number is about 67%. I don't think you can read the footnote that's represented by the asterisk over where it says PCE less net exports, but the personal consumption expenditures before they're adjusted for exports are about 70% of GDP, but the net exports reduce GDP by about 5%. And that's because they're negative. We import about 5% more than we export. You can see that over on the right side. So if we didn't provide for that 5% decline, then we would have 105, and we couldn't make the circle. So the way I've handled that is by subtracting the 5% from the 70%. And so over on the left, you see that PCE less net exports is 65%, not 70. And the footnote says that, you know, some of those personal consumption expenditures are from imports, and some of our consumption of products and services in other categories also are from net exports. When you net it all out, the consumer sector, PCE, actually is about 67%, just about 2/3 of the GDP. Obviously, ours is a consumer economy. The other segments of note are the non-residential investment. That's the orange bar, represents 15%, and it's made up of capital expenditures and expenditures by industry and commerce for the capital goods that are used to upgrade and replenish those businesses. That's different from government expenditures, which can include purchases of the same kind of machinery and equipment and so forth. And some of those also are from foreign sources. So it's difficult to net these things out exactly. The government does that, but in this diagram, I've taken some liberty by just subtracting the 5% net exports or negative imports, negative exports from the personal consumption expenditures. But you get the idea. You know, this is a consumer economy where we depend upon consumer markets for our economy, although the non-residential investment section certainly is not trivial at 15%. Interestingly enough, residential is only 3%. But if we add up the personal consumption and the capital expenditures of industry and residential investment, we end up with 83% in the private sector and 17% in government. Here's a little more detail. It's not terribly important to get into all of this detail, but when we're talking about personal consumption or consumer spending, you can see that some portions are more important than others. And the one that should stand out to you is services. Over time, this economy has become much more service-oriented, so the durable goods, the hard, durable product, are less important. Non-durable goods, such as those that we got at the grocery store, account for a larger portion by far than durable, but the most important, 3 times the size of non-durable, are services. So services are a big part of the consumer sector. And it wasn't always that way. In the past, durable goods and non-durable goods have been more important and services less so. Business investment, again, we have the non-residential component of expenditures, and then the others, capital goods, the next largest at about 7%. And then those net exports that we talked about earlier. Okay. Interestingly, perhaps, defense expenditures by the government are a relatively small category here, only 4% of GDP. And if you recall, if you have looked at my video on the defense industry and threats to the US that create markets, you will know that we are in a real contest with other nations, and that greater attention is probably going to be paid to national defense. So that's a category that well may increase and probably should. Here is that trade deficit, that 5% deficit that we were talking about. In terms of monthly deficits, the differences between imports and exports, you can see that it runs around $50 billion per quarter. So, and that it had been going up, dropped during the past year, but then picked up again. So, give or take, we're at about a $50 billion deficit. And if you watch the news, you know that Donald Trump often complains that we don't get a fair shake in our trade with other countries because they don't buy as much from us as we buy from them. And he thinks that particularly in the case of China, that's not a good deal. Here's what's been happening to the unemployment rate. And you can see a couple of things here. First of all, unemployment tracks with the general economy very closely. It's quite cyclical. So as you can see, the unemployment rate goes up and down. It goes up in those gray bars, and the gray bars represent recessions. So every time we have a recession, we have unemployment. As a matter of fact, some economists would probably tell you that unemployment is, in a way, the recession, because when folks are not employed, they don't consume much. However, we'll see that in this particular recession that we're in now, unemployment has gone up, but the government has really tried to offset the effects of the coronavirus by enabling people to continue buying things. And in a significant respect, that effort has been successful. In any event, you can see that the unemployment rate in this chart got up to almost 15%. That's pretty high, isn't it? However, in the second quarter, we had an improvement, and the unemployment rate came down somewhat surprisingly to about 12%. It wasn't expected to come down that fast. To some extent, this is an anomaly because the government has had provided payments to companies and individuals, particularly to offset unemployment, and basically to provide, to make it possible for small businesses to continue paying their employees, even though the business had fallen off. And if these funds weren't available, the companies would have to lay people off. Now, they still did, as you can see from this chart, but those layoffs were not as substantial as expected because of the amount of payments from the government to support folks who otherwise would have been laid off. And of course, unemployment benefits also increased. Here's another way to look at the same situation. This is the proportion of the population over 16 years old, as I recall, who are employed. And you can see that just before the recession, we were at about, 61%, something like that. And you can see also that that proportion had been coming down over time, partly because we have an aging economy, more people retire and so forth. But you can also see that this variable, this factor, is cyclical as well. The portion of folks in the population who are employed goes down with recessions, just like the portion who are unemployed goes up. And so in this most recent reading on this chart, we got down to about 51%. That is a drastic decline. So the coronavirus has had a major impact on the U.S. economy. Here again is what the Commerce Department's data show. I took this from the Commerce Department, but you can see that the number came up from 51% to 55. Still not a very good looking number, is it, compared to the 62% that it had reached previously. So things were going really well until the coronavirus. And now we have this big problem of a lot smaller portion of the population being employed. I think that this measure is more informative than unemployment. I think that this gives us a clearer way to see the employment picture than unemployment does. Here are a couple of exhibits that show what the government has done to respond to the coronavirus-induced recession. And you will see that some $3.7 trillion was injected into the economy during the 3 months between March and June. And that was 21% increase in the money supply as measured by M2. And I always have trouble remembering what M2 includes, but it's the currency in circulation plus bank deposits, savings deposits, and I think it includes CDs. But it's essentially, liquid currency. And it's gone up by more than a fifth, by 21%, just in 3 months. So, and those funds were distributed to people sometimes through their employers, sometimes directly. I'm sure you've heard in the news about the $600 payments and most recently the $300 payments. But the purpose is to keep the economy going while we recover from a coronavirus that was not of the result of any mistakes that the U.S. made in its economy or its industries made. It was caused by a virus that came to us from China. In any event, one way that we can look at the impact of money supply is to see how fast that money is being turned over in the economy. And we can see that in 1981, M2 was being turned over 3.5 times a year. That is to say, if we divide GDP by the money supply, we get 3.5. But in the most recent second quarter, it was less than 1 time. So this indicates that there is a lot of money out there, currency available. So, supply and demand, what do you think the price of money, just like soybeans or any other commodity, if there's a lot more of it, and in fact less economic activity to make use of it, maybe it's not quite as valuable. Maybe the price of money will go down. And the price of money in this case is interest rates. So and for that matter, exchange rates, when we compare what's going on in this country to other countries. So we'll see those effects pretty soon. In fact, here is the prime rate, the interest rate paid by the most favorable commercial lenders to commercial banks. And you can see that for quite some time, interest rates were moving up because the demand for money was increasing relative to supply. And so the prime rate got up to 5.5%. In this chart, the most recent rate is just about 3.2%. And in fact, in many interest rates, including the interest rates on government loans, government bonds, and commercial bonds, are down around 1%. So with all this money available, it's very difficult for lenders to charge high prices for the money that they loan. And we can see just how sharply the prime rate dropped in the first quarter of this year. It dropped from something like 4.7% to 3.2%. That's real sharp. So no surprise, this has also had an effect on the way in which our firms are able to do business in other countries when we need to purchase goods and services in those other countries in their own currency. The upper left-hand chart in this panel represents the trade-weighted dollar exchange index. It's a measure of the average exchange rates in pretty much all of our international trade. And you can see that for quite some time, the dollar was considered to be valuable, and its value in terms of other currencies rose. And frankly, at the beginning of the recession, the dollar's value rose sharply. But as the dollar became abundantly available, you can see that it was not worth as much in terms of other currencies as it had been. In fact, dropped pretty sharply. Just to put this into some real life terms, I just picked off 3 other charts from the Federal Reserve to illustrate that this same pattern existed in our dealings with our most important trading partners. So our neighbor to the north in Canada, the upper right-hand chart represents the number of Canadian dollars that are required to buy a US dollar. And you can see that it had gotten up to about $1.45 Canadian. And at this point, it's down to about less than $1.35. So I haven't calculated the percent, but from $1.45 to call it $1.32, that's almost a 10% decline, and that's pretty severe. And I'll explain why in just a second. First, let's just look at the other charts. We can see that right beneath the Canadian chart is the Mexican chart. Mexico's economy isn't as stable as Canada's, Its interest rates are higher, so it's had a little more difficulty. Nevertheless, it took, and again, I've got to be careful here, but 25 pesos to buy a dollar. Now we're down to about 22 pesos. So that's more than 10%. If we go to the lower left chart, we see the exchange rate with the Chinese yuan. And over the past several years, it took more yuan to buy a dollar, got up to about over 7 yuan to the dollar, about 7.2, and now it's down to about 6.9 yuan. When I was in China a couple of years ago, it was 6.7. You can find that spot on this graph and find out when I was in China. So here, even with China, because there's just so much U.S. currency out there, at least this is one major reason, we see that the dollar is not worth as much as it used to be, so it takes more dollars to buy Chinese yuan, more dollars to buy a Canadian dollar, to buy a Mexican peso. And much of the food that you buy in the grocery store comes from other countries, particularly Canada and Mexico. Many of the products that we buy and use every day, as you've heard in the news, do come from China. And so it takes more dollars to buy the same quantity of those goods. And therefore, all else being equal, we should expect the prices that you and I have to pay for those products to go up. So although it's been well worthwhile for the government to support employment, or at least to support the people who are either unemployed or can stay employed because we pay them even though there's nothing for them to do. There are ramifications to that. Incidentally, it's because these folks have who otherwise would be unemployed, that have been employed thanks to these payments from the government, so that businesses continue to keep folks employed, that the unemployment rate does not appear to be higher. Now that some of these payments have been reduced by the government, we well may see unemployment rates come up as businesses no longer are able to keep folks on the payroll. We'll see. Okay. But with these payments, among other things, we see that the median household income has continued to go up. Now this again is a little bit misleading because this is the household income above and below which half of the population falls. Of course, the people who are not in the survey are those who are not employed very often. And so although the median income appears to be going up, this is partly a factor of these transfer payments and the way in which the data are calculated. So here are real, that is inflation-adjusted personal consumption expenditures, what you and I spend in the stores. And you can see that when the coronavirus arrived, there was a sharp decline and then a recovery. That recovery has gone on. The retail sales continue to go up, not in all industries, but there has been a recovery, thanks, among other things, to government policies that have supported several industries. The food service, entertainment, and airline industries still are suffering, but the auto industry, by way of example, doing quite well. Grocery industry, obviously doing very well. Industries that produce products for the home that we use in the home, including computers, have done quite well because we spend more time at home now. So no surprise, with all this extra money that is being printed and distributed, the saving rate, the portion of disposable income that you and I do not spend, shot up sharply shortly after the pandemic arrived. We can expect to see that come down. We can see that in past years, say back around 1975, folks saved about 13% of their income. That was very healthy. That was great for the consumer sector because it indicated that families, by and large, were secure. Then, as prices for goods and services increased rapidly, and yet people felt confident in their abilities to hold a job, they did not want to part with the lifestyles and the living conditions that they'd become accustomed to. So rather than spending less, they saved less. And you can see that by 2005, give or take, we got down to 2.2% from 13%. And frankly, this is a dirty little secret, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I took a look at some of the Treasury Department data way back when, not recently, but what I found was that there was a time when the saving rate dipped below zero. That is to say that the expenditures exceeded incomes. And that apparently wasn't very satisfying to the folks who published the government statistics, so they found a better way to calculate it so that the number did not dip into the negative territory. I don't know whether we could go back and find those data now, but I did find them. Anyway, we then moved up into the direction of about 10%, and had leveled off at about 8%, which was a good, healthy saving level until, boom, we had this deluge of dollars, the dollar deluge, and the saving rate jumped up to 24%. And then you can't really see it, but it dipped back down to slightly less than 20%. And it will continue to decline because it can't stay that high. Okay, so debt service, the amount as a percent of disposable income. Since disposable income was higher, and there's another reason for higher disposable income, which we better touch on here in a minute. But you can see that debt service as a proportion of disposable income has really come down. between 2010 and 2019. That was because the economy was growing and employment and incomes were very, very lucrative. Um, in the recent months, the disposable income and the average wages have gone up, and it's misleading, and that is because the folks who are not included in the income statistics are the ones that get laid off by the restaurants, the bars, and so forth. And those folks generally earn low wages. And so when they're not included in the surveys, then the folks who remain in the surveys have higher wages and salaries than those who no longer are in the surveys because they're not employed. And so it looks like average incomes have gone up, and that's not true. It's just the fact that the folks who used to be in the surveys are now laid off, and those folks used to and will again earn relatively low wages and salaries. Here's another trend, and it's the trend in food sales. The black line represents sales, food sales from restaurants and bars. And you can see that it really dropped because of social distancing and so forth. On the other hand, the red line represents grocery stores. And the difference is quite dramatic. But you can see that prior to that time, folks were eating out a lot more, not least of which is because more were employed and ate and would eat in restaurants at lunchtime. And the other reason, of course, is that they had more money to spend, so they spent it in restaurants. But that has ended for the time being. And to take its place, people go to grocery stores and buy what they need to eat at home. Generally, this is what's gone on in industry, the non-consumer sector. Now, of course, that sector is driven by demand in the consumer sector, but you can see what happened to industrial production. It dropped to a point below anywhere in the past decade. So industrial production just really went into the tank, and it picked up a bit in the second quarter. And the Federal Reserve and the Commerce Department are projecting that it will continue to rise in the third quarter, and we should get those numbers very soon. This is a trend, a longer-term trend in labor productivity, and it's the output per hour worked. And you can see that things were going on really well through about 2014. And then for a variety of reasons, which are not entirely known by me, productivity declined. But to the extent that productivity of labor declines, costs, it's hard to get costs down, and it's therefore hard to get prices down. Now, inflation rates have been very manageable lately, but the efficiency of labor is always a concern. And we were doing just great. You can see that we were on sort of a steady decline from 1980 to 2000, give or take, and then we started this increase that really indicated that the U.S. was producing. This is partly due to automation, robotics, a number of trends that we talked about in some of the market videos. But in the recent years, I'll call it 4 years, 5 years, there's been a drop. We'll see what the effect is after we get through the coronavirus. Here, whoa, this is something we saw earlier. This is that trade-weighted U.S. dollar that we looked at in an earlier. Remember, we saw that way up here. That's that same one. So I'm going to go find it again and delete it because we don't need it any longer. I moved it back up there. Okay, here are some indications of activity in 4 industry groups, sectors. And in the private sector, just generally, you can see that the number of hours worked has declined. The hours in manufacturing have declined much more sharply and long before the coronavirus or even the recession occurred. This is partly due to obtaining manufactured products from offshore vendors, from manufacturers in China, for instance, and other countries. But when the coronavirus hit, that interrupted a trend where we were beginning to bring industry back to the U.S. Things were getting better, and then boom, the coronavirus arrived, and you can see where we are now. In construction, we also had a drop, but for a variety of reasons, which again are a little complex. If you look at that graph carefully, you can see that construction hours actually recovered and came back up, and they have continued to do so. Whoops. Why is that? Some folks have argued that it's because people have moved out of the city and want to buy homes in the suburbs. And that is a popular myth. And I say it's a myth because there's been a study. And it turns out that people who leave the cities are actually just moving to find other jobs, but they're moving to other cities. There's a large, pronounced trend of people to move toward urban areas. Some urban areas in the United States, as you're probably aware, are troubled by violence and the social unrest that we see in cities on the West Coast, for instance, as well as in the Midwest and the East. There's a lot of it. So in any event, as people leave their locations, it turns out that this study found that what they're doing is just moving to other urban locations. Suffice it to say that construction is up. The other big reason for that is the very low interest rates that I mentioned. So mortgage rates are quite low today, possibly 3% or lower. And that makes it easier, more affordable for people to purchase a new home or an existing home. The chart on the right includes construction and extraction, and really it's a chart of what's going on in the petroleum drilling and mining industries. And as you can see, because the demand for travel, for air travel, for people to drive to work. They're not driving to work, they're staying at home. But for all those reasons, there simply is a lot less consumption of petroleum fuels. And so you can see that employment in such industries has really dropped. So this is simply a little finer explanation of this chart that showed industrial production coming down. Now we can appreciate where that's happening. With regard to back to the consumer sector again, here's the chart that I was referring to earlier. We see median weekly earnings or real wages. And it looks like things are just great in the United States. In fact, there aren't. The reason why this average or median rather has gone up is because people who earn lower wages are not in the sample any longer. They're unemployed. So in the population that it remains to be surveyed, the median goes up. It was going up anyway, and that's a good sign, especially recently. But that sharp uptick is an anomaly, and when we get recovery of the economy and those people who work in food service establishments and other locations where lots of services provided, we'll see that line come down. The saving rate we've already talked about, and of course that's also an anomaly. More to the point, perhaps, is what we see here in the, if I can, whoa, I wanted to get it up, the changes in household net worth, where folks are having more difficulty paying their debts, where they have less income, less saving. We can see that overall, when all the households are surveyed or sampled anyway, we don't get 100%, we get samples. But you can see that the net worth, the difference between assets and liabilities of families dropped pretty sharply. And as a percent, it dropped by over 5%. So that's pretty severe. Here is, by the way, I probably should have had this up with closer to the charts on income, but this is a graph that shows the changes in prices for groceries and food not bought at home. The red line is the price of groceries. The blue line is services. So pardon me, I've got it all wrong. The red line is the price of goods, products, physical products. The blue line is the average price of services, which has stayed give or take pretty much in the same channel. But with the increasing purchases of groceries and with the declining value of the dollar, if you remember that, prices of services especially are beginning to move up. The prices of goods, the purchases, the products that we buy have been moving up in recent months a lot faster. And again, that's because of the demand for those goods when they're goods consumed at home, and also exchange rates. And I made a mess of that, but that's the point I wanted to get to. I think we're seeing the effect of exchange rates in that red line. I could have said that a lot easier, couldn't I? Here are some trends in prices, or the changes in prices that have been occurring in a variety of categories that are most important to you and me. And by and large, these are products that we think we either can't do without or we don't want to do without. So hospital services are, that's why there's so much political attention to healthcare. Prices of medical care, pharmaceuticals, which are really not in the same, are not rising nearly as fast as other healthcare categories, but medical care and especially hospital services, which are reimbursed by insurance companies. But in any event, they're pretty high. The price of education, we're hearing more about that now. The more that folks are attending classes online rather than on campus, has begun to raise questions about the appropriateness for the price of college tuition to continue growing up the way it has. Prices of college textbooks have begun to come down with e-books, among other things. The average hourly wages have not gone up as fast as those things, but they have kept up with the cost of housing and, again, food and beverages, although you may recall that due to exchange rates, we're probably going to see food and beverages moving up, and they're catching up, those prices increasing faster. Prices of new cars and clothing, household furnishings have been kept well in line. Cell phones and cell phone services have become more affordable, as has software. And the price of televisions are the best buy on the chart, aren't they? That's because you don't want them as much, since you're looking at television and other forms of entertainment with your personal computer telephone gadget. This is a summary of what we just talked about. It tries to capture the significance of categories of products such as healthcare and education, technology and technological products, and manufactured products. So you can take your time to look at these bullet points, but I think that you can read the points just as well as I can read them to you. So here are a few other prices that were not included in that chart that are important to, among other things, why we're able to save more You know as well as I do that gasoline has been a lot more affordable lately. There's been a great deal of crude oil produced, as well as natural gas. When you pump crude oil, you usually get natural gas with it, although there are large deposits of just natural gas as well. So we've got lots of natural gas in this country. And in one of the marketing videos, I explained what the significance of that is. But there are major consequences of the abundance of natural gas, not least of which is in the way in which we produce electric energy and reduce emissions of carbon dioxide when we burn coal. We have replaced the coal-fired plants with plants that burn natural gas, and natural gas is a cleaner fuel. In any event, this is neither of those. This is the gasoline that goes into your car, which does put a lot of effluents into the air, but the price of that gasoline has come down. And because there's so much, an abundance of crude oil, and it's gasoline is produced by refining crude oil, we can expect these prices to remain low for quite a while yet. So from the standpoint of our budgets, that's good news. This is the natural gas that I was referring to a couple minutes ago, and you can see that over time the price of natural gas has really come down, and it's made it a lot more affordable for, among other things, producing electricity, heating your home if you've got natural gas, and producing chemicals that are produced from natural gas. So this is an indication of a driver of lower prices for a lot of the products that we buy. Ladies, this includes perfume. Here is another one of these panels where we show things sort of in comparison. Once again, you can see the change in the prices of fuel coming down, really quite low. Price for public transportation also has come down. Partly, this would be rapid transit systems, bus systems, Amtrak, and so forth. But there's less demand for it, and in some cases, the prices actually have been reduced as a result. In other cases, the prices have been reduced because the price of fuel has come down. But the price of food has gone up, and we've already explained why that is. And but most folks are unaware that a big driver of the increase in food prices is exchange rates. And finally, on the lower right-hand side, the prices of new homes. And they continue to rise because there has been a substantial amount of purchases of existing homes, and to a lesser extent, new homes. Builders of new homes are building new homes, but they're reluctant to get extended too far because economic conditions are just so uncertain. Here are some more of those prices that we talked about. Medical care going up very sharply. Price of new cars is kind of held flat. Price of rent, because again, people are moving to new locations. Oh, by the way, underneath the price of new vehicles, which includes light trucks, pickup trucks, as well as cars, if we leave the pickup trucks out, we see that the price of cars has been coming down a little bit, but pickup trucks are so popular that their prices are increasing when the price of cars may not be increasing. Here's another issue completely, and it's an issue that I've mentioned earlier on, but it's the government debt as a proportion of GDP. And right now we're up in the neighborhood of 120% government debt to GDP. This is way over the norm, and way over historic norms. As the government continues to borrow more, we'll probably see this number continue to go up a bit further. Why is this a concern? Number one, it creates less confidence in the economy and the currency. So once again, currency exchange rates will be affected. Secondly, as you know, interest rates are quite low now. But with all of this new currency in the economy, basic economic theory suggests that with greater money supply, especially once the economy gets growing again, it's highly likely that interest rates will also go up. I won't bore you with all the details now, but if and when interest rates go up significantly, then all this new government debt will impose greater interest expense on the government. Why is that important? Because unless more money is printed, cuts will have to be made in services provided by the government that otherwise could be provided if interest expenses weren't so high. So this is not a pretty picture. Here is a change in consumer credit. This chart probably also belongs up a lot higher. But the consumer credit, of course, dropped a lot when the coronavirus hit, but it has picked back up. One of there are details here. I think maybe the notes indicate that, yeah, revolving credit, the credit in your credit card, that declined quite a bit and has in recent years. But non-revolving credit, time payments and so forth, actually rose prior to the recession by over $10 billion. So the availability of credit card capacity has been reduced as the banks lose confidence. Okay. So here we have some concluding charts that just sort of wrap things up in terms of general trends. So and general trends in government spending, so we see that in the upper left-hand chart, the government expenditures had been coming down until in recent years they really started to accelerate. And part of this reflects the what takes place politically. But the red line is particularly important. And again, you'll have to look at the video on national defense and the defense industry. But the red line indicates defense expenditures. And you can see in recent years, they've started up. Over on the right side, we see other federal expenditures. And the big item that really pops out there is Social Security. And this line will continue to go up as seniors retire. And they are, that's a trend that's in process right now. Notice, by the way, here again, we see defense expenditures, and defense expenditures until recently had been cut. And given the international tensions and threats that we are under now, that probably was not a very good thing. And we've got to rebuild the defense establishment and our defense capabilities without incurring waste. But the kind of cuts we saw there are pretty significant. One reason for that is that a large portion of that black line includes military benefits, benefits to folks who have retired from the military. Everything, all those expenditures aren't for warfighting equipment. Medicare, you can see the red line is also going up quite rapidly, as Medicaid has been going up, but not quite as fast. Now that we're in the recession, I would expect it to pick up. And you can see the green line is interest, and it's been coming up. But the next time these charts are created, that green line is going to go up like a rocket, isn't it? Because of all the increases in debt. All right, non-defense expenditures over on the left. Transportation, such as Amtrak, trucking and the like, is the black dotted line on top. Veterans benefits are the purple line, which is now approaching, and so we have veterans benefits in this line as well, but you can see that that's a portion of our defense expenditures. So we need to appreciate the fact that the defense budget doesn't include just warfighting equipment. It includes these benefits for veterans. And then we have healthcare, income security, and justice. So, and by and large, these lines are increasing, although the veterans benefits line is increasing the fastest. And finally, over on the right side, we can see the trends in government receipts. The black line is what the government gets from you and me, individual income taxes. The red line is from our Social Security deductions. The green line is corporate income taxes. And so way down at the bottom are excise taxes. But you and I are paying the bulk of the government's bills that the government doesn't pay for by printing money. The question is, to what extent will these trends continue? And based upon what we hear in the political rhetoric of recently, there's a big difference between what the two political parties would like to do here. I don't want to get political in this video, but There's no doubt about it. There's a difference between the two political parties' points of view about what to do what with these trends. Um, I think this is the last chart, so you'll be happy with that. But I do think that it's important for us to see these government expenditures for research and development and the borrowing. But at the top, we have research and development. The blue line is for NASA. That's probably discretionary, but and it hasn't been growing very fast. As a matter of fact, it declined for some years. But I don't know about you. It makes me proud when I see the United States putting new spacecraft into orbit. More importantly, our adversaries are doing that too, and we need to be able to keep up with our adversaries. National Science Foundation, the Atomic Energy Commission, the brown and the red lines. The transportation, sadly, and agriculture are not recipients of a large amount of expenditure funds. I say sadly about transportation because high-speed rail in other countries, such as China, is technologically highly advanced, saves lots and lots of fuel, and gets people places much faster than they can go by car. And it's just a step into the future. But for a variety of reasons, the U.S. just hasn't picked up on high-speed rail the way other countries have. And those other countries are not just in China, they're in Europe as well. So the U.S. is really behind the curve when it comes to high-speed rail. But based upon the trend in these lines, it doesn't look like we have any reason to expect much of a change. And finally, federal debt. The black line is the debt that the government issues in the form of bonds and notes and are purchased by banks and corporations and individual investors like you and me. Although I doubt at today's interest rates that you and I would be very interested. But what's important is what the shape of this line has done in recent years. And since about 2009, you can see that federal debt held by the public has moved from something like $6 trillion to $18 trillion. Folks, that's pretty rapid growth in the space of a decade. Then the little dotted line below is debt held by the Treasury. So I'm sorry, by the Federal Reserve. So if the Treasury needs funds, it makes a loan from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve holds that loan and provides dollars to the Treasury so that it can meet its obligations. That's convenient, isn't it? In any event, this, as I said, was the last of the slides. Let me see if I can bring these off the screen so that we can wrap up here. There we go. These trends, these economic trends in the U.S. Should give you some general idea of the major forces that are going to be acting. Obviously, by way of example, interest rates. Interest rates are very low and accommodating today. However, as the economy picks up and as interest rates rise, because there's so much more debt out there, this could be a significant issue. We've already seen what one of the impacts of the increase in money supply, and that is the impact on exchange rates. And because our country buys so much from foreign countries, that's going to have an impact on prices that we pay in the grocery store and elsewhere. So when you're working on your projects, on your team projects, to take a look at the industries that the company you're studying is in and the markets that they serve, think about what these economic trends will mean for those markets and the drivers of demand for the products and services that the company that you are studying offer to their markets. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll relieve you of the burden of watching this video and hope to see you real soon in the classroom, assuming that we're still conducting classes and that the coronavirus hasn't caused us to to close classes again, which I notice has been happening in a couple of North Carolina universities just recently. So with that, I'll say goodbye. Goodbye.